So, this is a very common issue, especially for career changing non traditional students. When you are changing careers, if you've been out of undergrad for a long time, then what are you going to do with those prereqs? Now, welcome to the Old Pre-Meds podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week, where I take your questions directly from the non traditional pre-med forum over at premedforums.com and answer them here on the podcast. Today, we have a great question from a non-trad pre-med with over 10 years of undergraduate courses. So let's go and jump in because I'm sure some of you are potentially in that same boat. Our student today asks, I was a pre-med student about 13 years ago. I completed most of my science courses except organic chemistry and biochemistry. I also took the MCAT and scored above the national average. However, I only got one interview and was subsequently waitlisted. I figured it was because my GPA was 3.5. I needed the GPA boost, but also wanted to challenge myself even more. So I decided to get into the public health field to gain more experience in population health. After years of working in hospitals and departments of health, I'm still drawn to becoming a medical doctor. I plan to take the MCAT this year for 2021 entry. However, I have a lot to catch up on before the test since it's been a while. I dove into any of the science subjects. Also, some of the schools that I'm interested in require sciences to be taken within 5 years from the application cycle. I spoke to a pre-health advisor who recommended that I retake my prereqs before taking the MCAT or applying, but this would mean I would take an additional year to apply for 2022. I don't want to wait that long because I feel I've waited too long to pursue my dream. My question is, should I take the pre-health advisor's advice and wait to retake the MCAT, or should I go ahead and take the MCAT once I've completed my content review and then retake the courses later this year and into the following year? My MCAT score from practice tests was below the national average, but I was expecting that since I'm quite rusty and need to study up. But my pre-health advisor feels the low score indicates a foundational issue that will be remedied once I retake the courses. I believe I can self-study and get the score I need. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. So this is an interesting question. So the title, I read it as the 10 years of undergraduate courses, but no, it's been 10 years since the undergraduate courses, at least 10 years. So this is a very common issue, especially for career-changing non-traditional students. When you are changing careers, if you've been out of undergrad for a long time, then what are you going to do with those prereqs? Those prereqs can hinder you at some schools. As the student said, some of the schools require or want your science classes to be taken within 5 years. Now, does that mean you have to go and retake your classes? Nope. There are schools out there that don't really have prereqs. They don't require anything other than a good GPA, a good MCAT score, and a good foundation of why you want to be a doctor, and they'll accept you. So for a lot of schools, this student and many other students can have really old classes and not retake them, and that is okay. It may limit you from some of the schools that you are thinking of applying to. And so I want to preface the advice that I'm going to give with the knowledge that you really need to do your homework. And right now, there isn't a really good tool out there that will say, hey, this school requires your prereqs within 5 years. I haven't seen a good database like that. Now, mappd.com, which you should go check out, mappd.com. Right now, as I'm recording this, it's just a sign-up page because we're actively working on this. I have a partner. This is a new business venture for me. I have a partner in this, and we have an amazing, smart team around us, and we have a development company actively building out a new technology platform, and this kind of information will be in there so that when you build your school list, it'll say, hey, your classes are too old for this school, and then it'll have some information about how to proceed because of that. And so mappd.com, mappd.com, go check it out. But with that said, obviously, the MCAT is going to be the big hurdle here. Can you self-study for the MCAT? The answer is yes. Anyone can self-study for the MCAT. It just may take a really long time. So this student saying that they want to start medical school in 2021 means they're applying in 2020. And for me, and they wrote this in February, I'm recording this in April, so it's a couple months old at this point. But for me, that's a very quick turnaround. And so I would probably, potentially, maybe, and this is just talking about MCAT and classes right now, and we can get into some activities in a second. But from an MCAT and classes standpoint, it seems like a couple months to self-study most of the material for the MCAT is probably very, very fast. Now, obviously, as I'm recording this, we're in the middle of a pandemic and everything got shut down anyway. And so, hey, maybe the student has a chance, especially this year, especially with a shorter MCAT, maybe there's a better chance of not knowing things, right, and still getting a decent score because there's less questions on the MCAT that will potentially test material that you didn't have time to self-study. So that's one way of potentially actually looking positive at these MCAT changes. So with that said, one thing that is still very important in this conversation, and I would venture to say is maybe why this student was waitlisted to begin with, is that they didn't have enough clinical experience. They didn't have enough reason behind why they wanted to be a doctor, which was why they were waitlisted to begin with. A 3.5 GPA and an MCAT above the national average, probably good enough. Now, what is the national average? Was that the median 500? Or was that the average for matriculation or accepted? So that's one question that I still have. But if your MCAT score was quote unquote above the national average for matriculants with a 3.5 GPA, your stats weren't an issue. Now, if your MCAT score was above the national average in terms of just median, that's not very good. That's not very good, right? So if you say the national average, the median is 500, right? Or median is 500. That's and back in the day it was a 26, I believe. You were at 50%. And above the national average, if you were 52nd percentile, that's not very good. And so maybe the MCAT was an issue, but the student did get an interview and was waitlisted. And so stats for at least that one school weren't a big issue. So with that said, my question is, what are you doing clinical experience-wise? What are you doing shadowing-wise? What are you doing activity-wise to prove to yourself that you want to be a doctor? Not just that you have it in your head that you still want to be a doctor, but what are you actively doing to prove that you want to be a doctor? That is a big thing that a lot of students miss. And they think, oh, I have the stats, I have the MCAT score, I have the GPA, I have the desire, therefore I can get into medical school. And they miss the whole part of proving it, right? Actions speak louder than words. Your actions need to map to you wanting to be a physician. You need to be around patients. You need to be around doctors. You need to be in and around healthcare, not just have good stats. And whether you're traditional or non-traditional, all of that matters. And so for this student, focusing just on this one question, should you retake the classes before taking the MCAT? You don't have to, but it's going to take longer to study for the MCAT. And so just make sure you have enough time to study for the MCAT. And understand that there will be some schools that you potentially will not be able to apply to, or you can apply to if you want to waste your money, but that won't accept you because your prereqs are too old. So hopefully that was helpful for this specific situation. Non-trads with really old classes, you're in this catch-22. Do I need the classes to apply to medical school? Do I need the classes to do well in the MCAT? Really, the ultimate answer is it comes down to you as a person. How dedicated and motivated are you to do well on the MCAT without retaking those classes? The material is there. The knowledge is there. You can learn it. We don't have to go pay an institution to learn this information anymore, right? We have the internet. All of it's there. We have Khan Academy, right? I donated to Khan Academy a few weeks ago because their servers were overloaded because everyone's at home. So we have the information at our fingertips. Just know that it's going to take longer than a typical MCAT study period. And if you have that window to study, great, go for it. And then just understand that you're going to potentially lose out on some schools. But remember that the actions, the shadowing and clinical experience and all that stuff matters just as much. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. I mentioned Mappd.com. Mappd is the new technology platform that I am starting with a partner and a team around me. We are super excited. We're hoping to have it out in the fall. In August is our projected launch date. So we're recording this in April right now of 2020. We're hoping to have it out in August of 2020. We have a fun day coming up. Again, go to mappd.com, mappd.com. We have an awesome day that should be announced as this comes out. This podcast episode comes out. I'm going to drop it here, nationalpremedday.com. On 5/28, we'll have more information about Mappd and much more. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the Old Pre-Meds podcast.